blood are glowing.
Vampire. Probably regenerates here.
Just 5 more minutes. Is it 1358 yet?
No.
Then fuck off.
This is probably one of the more memorable mini-quests in Witcher 3. In just 4 lines of dialogue, this vampire manages to become one of the greatest minor characters in the entire game. And whilst his appearance is short, in both options the game provides, his question about whether or not it is 1358 yet has left people wondering why he wanted to rest until that year specifically. 1358 is an oddly specific year. He could have asked for a decade to be awakened, or even a century, but instead he has a precise year in mind. So, is there anything important happening in 1358? In the books between the chapters we are given segments from fictional notes and books. Some of these have been written centuries after The Witcher takes place, and they often can give us details about the events that transpired between 1270 up until the 16th century, maybe even beyond that. When looking at these notes, the ones that come closest to the date is 1350, with the Haak invasion, during which horse-riding warriors from Haakland invaded the north, where they slaughtered and pillaged to their heart's content, for a while either before going home or being defeated. But 1358 is still 8 years after the Haak invasion, making it most likely an unrelated event. Instead, we might want to look at a piece of information we have that has no precise year, as there's a gap between 1350 and 1373. And in this gap, we might be able to place the second conjunction. The first conjunction of the spheres was the event that brought most of the monsters and humans into the world of The Witcher. It took place around 230 before Resurrection, and it was basically the event that shaped the world the way it is now. And amongst those creatures that came to the continent were vampires. In Blood and Wine, we get reminded from time to time that vampires don't feel at home in this world. They don't like it here, and they really want to get home. One of the best examples is the unseen elder in Toussaint, who lies waiting for the gate to his world to once again open up. And the vampire we encounter in the mini-quest is technically a higher vampire. He is not a higher vampire in the same way that Regis, Dettlaff and the Unseen Elder are. Instead, he is a Katakan, a slightly lower type of higher vampire, which falls in the same range as some other vampires like for example Bruxas. They are intelligent and able to think, so it could make sense that he would feel a longing to go back home. But why would he specifically wait for the year 1358? And how would he predict that this is the year of the second conjunction? Well, it might have something to do with where we find him. The professor that wants us to take a look inside the tomb of the vampire tells us he is looking for an elven tome called the Dara manuscript. And according to the man, the manuscript contains information that could give new information on the conflict between the An-El and the An-Shey, the elves of the Wild Hunt and the elves of the continent. And we know that the Wild Hunt travels between worlds often, and in an unknown year before the 1370s, the An-Shey left the continent during the second conjunction. So maybe, perhaps, this vampire has found the tome the professor was looking for. Maybe he read it and came to the conclusion that the second conjunction would happen in 1358. As for the tome itself, he could have given it to other vampires to read, and as a way to inform them that the next conjunction could happen in that year, which could explain the lack of the tome in the tomb itself. Also, something to note is that those blue orb-like plants that grow on the ceiling in this elven ruin also appear in the cave of the Unseen Elder in Toussaint, further adding that it might even be possible that a very small minor portal could open up on this location where this vampire sleep. But in this case, if the year is not related to second conjunction, maybe it is a reference to something in the real world. When looking at information from 1358, there isn't a lot that stands out. There are only a few things listed, so I decided to take a look at the Wikipedia page of Gdansk, the Polish harbor city that Novigrad has taken a lot of inspiration from. And the Wikipedia page of Gdansk does list one thing that happens in 1358. The city joined the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League was at its height a commercial and defensive confederation of merchant cities, spread across from the Netherlands all the way to West Russia, and at its height had 200 cities that were members. And Novigrad is a trade city in The Witcher, so maybe it is a reference to this. The quest takes place below the city after all. But I still hope for something more of the second conjunction, but who knows. Maybe 1358 is the date in which the next Witcher game takes place, which by the time a new game could be released would already be a 10-year-old quote about the year. But the idea that you just enter the tomb once again in a future Witcher game in 1358, go to the vampire, if he's still alive, and he asks again, is it 1358 yet? And you can say yes. It just seems like a fun attraction and a reference to put in. But what do you think the vampires were waiting for? Till the next video. Bye.